kick off recording. All right, let's look at the window because we have, I think we have used a little bit of these window methods already. In Full Stack 1, we probably didn't know what we were doing, and we probably didn't understand at that point what they were. We just knew that there was something happening in terms of prompts and things like that. But, you know, we want to talk about the window as an object itself. It may be basic, but I gotta tell you, I still, to this day, you know, even an hour ago, there was an issue that I had in my current job where when they deployed source code to the testing environment, a couple times there was 500 errors. Now, what a 500 error is when the application or browser loads up and things, it's basically an internal error. And sometimes you need to check if the window is loaded or not. Because if the window isn't loaded, then things don't work out. It's a simple check, but easily forgotten. And sometimes your local dev environment will not work exactly the same as a production or a testing environment. And it's very weirdness because like you may not see it either due to caching or some other kind of issues or build things that you have on your end for development. If you heard the saying, it works on my machine, yeah, sometimes it works on your machine, but then when you deploy it out, it can break. So I have to solve that. After this meeting, I gotta go put a check in for the window, because if I put that check in, then I can solve that error and unblock somebody. So topic for this piece will be the window object, window properties, and then window methods. Just so we formally cover it, because we've already kind of talked about it, but the window. So when we're talking about the window, we're not talking about the window that you look outside of your building or room, right? There's actually a Microsoft scam going. Well, there was going around. It's actually quite funny. Find on YouTube where they keep calling people to ingest some malware, and then they get this old guy and he keeps saying, well, you know, look out your window, look at your windows. And he kept looking out and adjusting his window, his real window. So not talking about the real window, we're talking about the browser window. The browser window is the so when we refer to this window of that browser, there's actually an interface. And that's the part of those web APIs that we've been already discussing with the document. There's also the Windows interface. So the window interface represents the window containing a DOM document. So the window is the container to the document, right? That's that entire piece that we can see here that may contain your window, or sorry, your document. Your document may be the internal in here, and then we have the window around it. Sometimes, you know, we need to check if it's truly loaded or not. And then if we actually look at that window, the attributes to it is it may have, you know, it may have a location bar, it might have a scroll bar, right? Some don't. You can turn it off. And then we have like a status bar. And then there's many other attributes to that window, but we can actually tap into that window and do some cool stuff. And also part of that API comes with a lot of, well, not a lot actually, it's not really a lot, but there are some important things in there that we can use that we haven't really used yet. And we may not get into all of them today, but just need to know about them. Right, so the document property points to the DOM document. The document property, I guess, of the window points to the DOM document loaded in that window. So when we talk about the DOM, again, we're going to talk about that in the second half. That's that document object model. So that's the representation of that HTML tree. So that's content, right? So when that content, that tree loads up, that's inside of the window, right? So we have to differentiate from the two, and we have to know where we are when we're using these interfaces. That if we're using the document, we're referring to the content. If we're using the window, we're referring to the parent container. We just have to know where we are when we're calling these methods and not get them too confused, because they can get very confused. Where you are in the application, right? But it's a global variable and window. So we've used window already. We may not have known it, but we've already used it. And sometimes you don't explicitly have to include window on, say, an alert. We've done something before where we triggered an alert, and maybe we just in JavaScript we just said alert, and we were just like, how does JavaScript know about this? Because in behind the scenes are known because it's global. Remember what global scope is? It's available everywhere. When in fact prompt or alert is actually window.prompt and window.alert. But we may have not known that actually. So global variable, the whole, it's like one with everything, right? So it's global and everybody can see it in your code base. So the global variable window represents the window in which the script is running and exposed to the JavaScript code. So your JavaScript code will internally just understand some of these things. Again, global variables. If you need to refresh yourself on global variables versus local, I believe one of the later sessions in Full Stack 1, we covered that. But anyhow, this global object has these pieces here to it. Let me just minimize this general thing here. Remember, I can't really see too many chats. If there's any questions, you know, if they build up, I'll have to catch them. But right, so the window has some of these properties on it, some of these methods on it. So navigator. So a navigator may be, like the locate the navigator. Probably have to look at that one up actually. The document, I have to look up that API. The document, we know that's the DOM, the document with all those methods on them. The history object, I don't want to get them confused with the navigator. History is like, you know, your history of the browser in a sense. You can go back. When you click the back button on your browser, which is in the window, you are taking a step backwards, right? And there's a whole API around history. The screen, of course, which we'll probably talk about mostly in this slide, is a screen and all the attributes along the screen. The document itself will, I think that's just referencing the properties, not to be confused with the DOM document object. Sorry, the DOM object, which have its own APIs. And the location. The location would be the address bar and some of these things, so you can control some of the stuff. So the window object is used to open a window in a browser to display the web page. Right, so you need this object in order to open a browser. You could kick off, and we will in our lab, like, you know, you could kick off 10 tabs, and you could open up an address. In fact, I'm sure there's probably some you know, malware where you click it and it kicks off like 1,000 browsers and browsing tabs to try to crash your system. Yep, that could happen. It could probably be very easily done with injecting JavaScript. So as this figure here that shows the hierarchy of the browser objects. If you notice, documents up at the top. However, this object from the window API may be read-only, because this is just a property on this object. Now, when you're dealing with this API, it may look a little bit different, but that's a different API. So again, we got some properties on this object. We have, as you know, we have the console object. We already know about this one. And if you had just run console.log, you will know exactly what we're talking about. But if you didn't know, you could explicitly use this property and put window.console.log in front of it. Again, because it's global, we don't need that namespace, which is window, because the JavaScript automatically knows that this is part of it. But however, the explicit, I guess, full path would be window.console.log. And then, as we know, inside of the console, there are many types of console, I guess, logging types: log, debug, error, these kind of things. So it provides all the methods for logging, as we've already practiced already. These methods are intended for debugging purposes, should not be relied on presenting information to end users, which we kind of already established. I even made not a mistake today, but you know, I checked in some code that has console logging in there, right? And you know, even somebody in a code review just said, "Hey, do you want to keep that in there?" I said, "No, we should get rid of it, really." If you don't know, you can see my console, my DevTools. Right now I have it full screen. These three buttons here, ellipsis, control whether or not you want to dock it or put it back. So right now I'm taking everything up. I'll put it at the bottom of my browser and it should readjust here. So if I console log, sure, hello, let's try it. Window.console, console. So if you already using that window object, window, it's already giving me a global object here that has returned to me. So this is a global object here. So now you could see a lot of the properties on here as part of this object here, and there's a lot on there. Maybe I should expand this a little bit out right now. So we have this huge window object, and inside of that window object, there's a lot of things on it. You can see right there, there's something called alert. We already used that before. Again, you could probably drill into this. Globally, it has a bunch of properties on it. It has a flag there for closed, which is false because it's not closed. It has some things as location, parent, self, these kind of things, the window, attributes on it. I'm sure there's a lot more that you could really look at if you wanted to. And this is quite long. There's quite a bit to it, and all the methods that could be on this thing. So we don't need to look at all that right now, but I just wanted to show you that you could do window.console .log in the same way. It's just going to return back exactly what we did. So we don't need to put that explicitly, but just know that that's where console comes from, as well as a lot of other ones you might feel familiar with as we learn them. So console is one. Document. So document. So this is referring to window.document returns a reference to the document contained inside of the window. So it returns a reference to it. So we have document, the node, the event target. So window.document.title. So let's actually try to console log that. Console log window.document.title. Do we have anything there? New tab. So it's basically saying that the document title, because we didn't establish one, is this new tab here. See that? If we were to go to any one of these other ones, they would have, you know, at class or whatnot. So we could also probably not even refer to the window at all, and we could just say document.title, which is the same. If we wanted to look at the web docs in that one, I think I have window.document. So let's look at window doc. A reference to the document contained. Now, for some, maybe it is a reference, and then you can actually manipulate it. Probably can. So a way of getting to it, window.document. So when we use document a lot, some of these are read-only. So this is actually grabbing that document content. And then remember the browser compatibility. Not all these browsers are going to support everything. Just so you know, some of these methods on the window have been around for a long time, and they may not be supported on every newer browser. So it's best to check this compatibility chart when you can. Because I imagine for older browsers, some of these pieces will not be available. But you know, when you're talking about some old school stuff like frames, you got to make sure that yeah. Again, refer to this. You can see the trash can. Some of these things are deprecated, right? So need to look at those. So that's document. Inner height and width. Again, we can get the height and width of our page. It's read only though, so you can't modify the width of the page on the fly using this property. And you got to remember that when we're talking about inner height, there's also a concept of outer height, outer. So think of it like a box. Inner width returns the interior of the window in pixels. And then there's also the height, obviously. Returns the interior height of the window in pixels, including the height of the horizontal scroll bar present. So that's a tricky thing with windows. You know, if we looked at a very bland window here, it would be the internal, you know, the internal piece here, right? Also the interior, you can't see my mouse over, but it also takes in, for the width, it takes into the account the scroll bar in the calculation. So they may use that as a viewport, right? So let's say viewport HTML. I think we already covered this. I'm not sure if we did with viewports. So here's basically showing a document from one corner to the other in the interior. So anyhow, there's different viewports for devices. I don't want to get into that, but inner height and width, and then of course we have the outer height and width. Oh my God, skipping inner. Oh, I probably didn't show that, but there is a concept of outer height and outer width, right? So window.outer height. So again, read-only property returns the height in pixels of the whole browser, including any sidebar, window Chrome, or window resizing border handle. So basically it's calculating your entire window, whereas the inner minuses some of these other pieces like this navigation, this location bar, scroll bars. You get it. Inner, outer, right? Think of a box. Think of CSS with the padding and the border and all of that. Same kind of deal. So again, I didn't want to go over all of that because it's the same kind of repetitive there. You can actually quickly check if your window is in full screen mode. Maybe you have some code that depends on whether or not it's maximized. Maybe you need to, maybe you would have need to, you know, adjust some kind of CSS. However, I will tell you this one is quite old. If you don't remember back in CSS, I may have mentioned, but we never covered it. There's a concept of media tags, and media tags can check the viewport of the device, whether or not it is actually a phone, like the viewport of the phone, the viewport of the tablet, desktop, and switching in between all of those devices. When you switch in between all of those devices, you actually can apply different styles on them based on, and your user interface can be what's known as responsive, right? And yeah, I'm sure you remember that. If you don't, I'll show you quickly. Let me pop this out. Let me go to a site that I'm familiar with because I am working on it every day. If we go to this site here, again, this is the full desktop view, right, of this site. As we start to decrease the size, you can see the different kind of interface changes, right? So already this has you see that search bar kind of snapped, right? It kind of snapped as we were moving. As we're moving now, everything is kind of changing a little bit. So now we have kind of a phone view, and now everything's been minimized or reshaped. Now we have like a kind of a carousel here. We have different pieces kind of loading up, and different pages will be different. This is kind of a scroll bar navigation here again with this kind of mobile kind of hamburger menu, right? Whereas if I quickly flip back to full screen, as you can see, everything now there is no hamburger menu. Some of these pieces are a lot obviously bigger because it's actually done that resizing based on the viewport, right? So in maybe older iterations of JavaScript, you would check whether it was maximized or not. So what I can tell you about that method is it is a good one. I remember using it. It will indicate whether the window is displayed in full mode or not. True, false. So true if it's in full screen, false if not. But again, I wanted you to know about this. And if you don't listen to this part, your lab 1 question might be very difficult. You have to scroll down to the bottom. Now, this is a perfect example here where this is not actually supported anymore by a lot of newer browsers. So Chrome does not support this. Edge does not. Firefox does. The other browsers don't. So they're not sure either about the Android or some of these. So in one of your examples, you may find it undefined because you can only see it under Firefox. That's a trick, actually. So if you are doing lab 1 and you didn't hear this, you're going to ask me, somebody's going to ask me, why can I not get this to work? That's why it's not supported by every browser. So, but it's good to mention, to be honest, that you could actually check it. In the past, where you didn't have media tags such as CSS to check for the viewport. Another property is the scroll bar. You can actually have reference to the scroll bar object. Most likely, you will be checking whether or not the visibility is. You can check the visibility, right? This is not read only, so let's just check this right here. So, where did my window go? I think I lost my window. Oh, it's okay. I'll open up DevTools again. So the window.scroll bars. Yes, it gives me back the entire thing, but it says it's visible. It's true. So visible. It's true. So if it doesn't say it's read only, so I might be able to hide it on the fly here. Let's see. Notice the scroll bar on the side. If I can hide it, no, I can't. It didn't let me do that. I guess if I reload it, I can. But so I've done that before. Manipulate the scroll bar. And remove it, but I guess it's actually not letting me do it unless I have like a page load or something like that. When I first open the window, I can certainly hide it, but anyhow, you can dig in not only to window, but you can dig into the status bar. Same deal, status, window.status bar, there you go. Same deal, as well as scroll bar, status bar, and you can also hide. So sometimes you'll see those pop-ups that are just pop-ups. They're actually windows, but they strip it down. So they strip up. So if you go to like a site and there's an annoying pop-up that is empty and it's hard for you to close it, because what they do is they actually close all the controls. Like they actually open a window that is meant not to be closed or be hard to close, those hackers or spam sites or whatever, because they hide all the buttons or disable them, and then they try to hide the scroll bar, the navigation bar, so you're kind of locked into a screen. It's very difficult to close. So if you get good at JavaScript, you may do that too for whatever reason. But yeah, so that's a property scroll bar. History. So history object is what it may sound like. It's a read only, but it returns the reference to that history object, which provides an interface for manipulating the browser session history pages visited in the tab or frame that the current page is loaded in. So you can do history.back, equivalent, I spell it right, to clicking back the back button. History.go, -1 is equivalent to the back button. There's also, now let's look at this for a second here. If I did this, window.history, so it actually will give me that little method there. It says I have some information here in my history. What happens if I do window.history.back? Do you see that? It kicked. I actually navigated my whole browser back without clicking the back button, right? So let's try that again. So, right. So now I'm actually one back. So if I went to this site and then I went to Netflix and then I went to, I don't know, NBA.com. So I can go back, right? I can go back again, right? So I can also, I think, so let me clear this out. So instead of just going back, it's already, this site's loading a bunch of stuff. Back 2 pages, how about 3 pages? Let's try it, 3 pages. All right, so now I went back a few times here. So, well, actually it's not, is that allowing me to, let's look at it, window.history. But anyhow, I want you to look at that method because there is something interesting on that method. So again, I can't search that here, window.history. You may actually become to know this one because the history API is often used in, so we're going to get down to the bottom here and there should be something. Okay, this is a reference to the history object. If we look at that history object, so that's a read only, but the history API, so we're not talking about the history API. But in the history API, there are more things too that just go forward and back. Somewhere on this object, there's a push state and replace state. Now this may not mean anything to you right now, but when we get into React, and in fact Angular, those front end frameworks, they actually use the history API to do a lot of their routing and redirects, right? Because when you have a single page application, you have to pretend as if it's a multi-page. So you need a way to navigate when you're not going anywhere. So it uses the history object to make it all work. So that's a one note there. But when we're using the window.history, it's read only. So we can't modify it. We can just use the API through here. Right, so why not I just mix it up a little bit and play a video here. Let me know if you cannot hear this.
It's hard to manage your workload, especially when your team doesn't know who's working on what. But
in this video, we're going to discuss the Windows object and how to do a page redirect. But first, let's talk about the Windows object. Now, previously, we've been talking about, of course, the document object. So what is the difference between the Windows object and the document object? The document object, basically, it comprises our entire web page inside the browser. That is the HTML document. But there may be times that you need to work against the browser window itself. That is all this stuff outside the HTML document. You may need to do certain things, and that's where the Windows object is very useful. And one of the main reasons JavaScript developers use the Windows object is for page redirects. And we've all done that. You've gone to a page and basically that's not the web page anymore, right? They want to redirect you to a new web page. That is where you can use the Windows object because again, we have to work against the URL that's in this address field inside the browser. So again, you need to use the Windows object in JavaScript to do that. And the good thing is all of the modern browsers support the Windows object in JavaScript. So this is very useful. You can go ahead and change this using the Windows object. So that's what we're going to do in this video. Now you can see here, I've got 4 files in my website folder. This is the index old, which I guess that's not really an original name, but this is the page that our users are first going to come to. And think of this as our old website. So we no longer want to use this. We're going to link to our new web page, which is this web page I just closed. This is the new index.html and this is the old one. And as usual, I will provide all the code for this lecture. So the new index.html has its accompanying style sheet right here, these 2 files. And then the index old will be using this JavaScript file right here. These 2 files will go hand in hand. And so we really don't need to update anything in here. We're just going to be linking to this new web page. These are the 2 ones that we need to be concerned about, the old index.html. So that being said, let's go ahead and close this out. And let's just go ahead and load our old index page here. We'll just load this in Chrome. Let's go ahead and minimize this. So you can see here, this is a very basic web page. I guess there's a reason we're linking to that new web page. There's not a lot here. And I just put in some text. The web page has moved to a new site. Please click the button to go to new site. I probably could have worded that a little bit better. Then we have our button here. Hit submit for new site. And this is something we've been doing throughout the series. You guys all are aware of how the on-click event attribute works now. When we click this button, our function will get executed, which in this case is called change page. So this is all set to go. So what we need to do then is go to our JavaScript code. And basically, this is going to be fairly simple. You're going to see how easy this Windows object is to use. So what we basically need to do now is write some code. And again, it's going to be a very simple line, but we just need to redirect to our new web page. And again, the object that we use that represents this whole browser window is the Windows object. So you just specify window. That's all you have to do. And then, of course, we have to use the access modifier. Remember to access our properties and methods with this object. And, of course, we use the dot for that. And the property that we're going to be using is the location property right here. That is what we're going to be using. This is the property that represents the URL itself that's in this little address field. That's what we use to access this. And in this case, we want to alter this URL. So that's the property that we use for changing URLs. So we're just going to go ahead and put in our new web page that we want to redirect to. And in this case, of course, it was index.html, which is in the same web folder. And of course, we need our famous semicolon. And now this should work. Now, I should add that if you want to go ahead and just put in a real world address here, you can. You could put in Google's address right here. Just remember, you need to put in HTTP. You need to start it out with that. But you can also do that if you just want to redirect to a real page out on the web. You can go ahead and certainly do that. So let's go ahead and save this. And we should not have to actually save our index.html. We should just be able to hit the submit button. It should work. Let's see what happens. And it did. Look, it redirected to our new web page. And so that's how the Windows object works, and that's how a page redirect works. Okay, that's going to do it for this video.
Python's where it's at. You can do almost.
All right. So what? Actually, interesting thing there. Interesting thing there was the the on-click event. So we haven't really looked at that one. So we actually have not looked at that one, to be honest. But on-click, we will be looking at on-click in on Friday's class for events. It'll actually help you to get a little bit familiar with events, right? So now we can actually, when we get used to those things, we can actually add some interaction to our pages when we actually learn events, right? In that class, because right now we've been doing this kind of situation here where we kind of had, let me just quickly show you this example here. So firstly, there is a property on the Windows object called frames. Frames is a little bit older school, but they're still valid, part of HTML, frames. And you can actually use those frames. So let me just go to this example here. By the way, I uploaded a bunch of starter code as well as the quizzes to that GitHub repository on my address. So if you want to see some of those quiz answers, I'm going to try to put them inside of the class. So for full stack, if I go to full stack 2 and I have quizzes down here, my plan is to upload the answers to the quizzes here so that, if you need to look back on them, you can. And if I'm behind on them, let me know. I see I didn't put up question 3. And for today's class, there will be this starter code here, so you can actually navigate to the question. If I don't have example 1 or something like that, that means you need to create your own code for that. But that will be for here. But I'm going to plan to put all the quizzes in there. Where was I going here? Sorry. Navigate to blockchain, full stack 1. I just want to show you this example here. All right, so examples for window. So I'm going to open up these properties here. Again, because we didn't have any, we were kind of invoking our functions on page load. We didn't really know why. We had to keep refreshing, right? That was kind of a tedious process because we really didn't have access to, see, it's trying to load it here, but it's blocking it because you know what? Frames are bad. Frames are they don't, websites usually try to block things being loaded inside of frames. But you can see there when you hover over these frames, it's like an internal window. What it's doing is it's trying to block it because it doesn't want you to view. Number one, because they don't want their content viewed from an external source. They want you landing on their own web page, landing on their own source. Landing on the site yourself, so they can track analytics and whatnot. They don't want third-party websites delivering content for their site and maybe charging for it or whatnot. So they usually have found a way to block this kind of thing, but I was trying to do it anyways. So what I tried to do here was, okay, if I commented this code out, let's try and see if any of these actually run without. So I can, in Visual Studio Code, I can actually toggle these line comments here quickly. One thing to note also here, somebody asked me, why would you ever want to put a script tag not in a header tag? Because when we're dealing with manipulating the window and manipulating the DOM, sometimes we need the window and the document to load first before we can run our scripts against it. Because if we have our script in the header tag, the page may not be loaded. And if you don't know how to use those events, you may never get to those nodes in time. So for our examples today, sometimes we're going to put the script after the body or at the end of the page so that we can guarantee that the page is loaded and the window is loaded before we're trying to access some things. All right, getting back to this, let's refresh it. Does any of these load up or are they all blocked? So this one load up. Did George Brown load up? So something loaded up here. No, that was georgebrown.com. So you can see this website here looks like a, like a GoDaddy kind of site that doesn't have any protection against it. So you can see Google refused to connect, Tesla refused to connect, but this website here allowed it. So what I did in this example here was I have a web page here. I'm using the old school iframe. Now this is really old school and people hate iframes. They hate them because the web used to be polluted with iframes, and of course now we are protecting against it. But it's still available. So what I'm doing here, I'm going to toggle this code back, and what we're doing, oh my God, sorry. You can do Control Z also, and it'll undo your last, there we go. Or Control Y to apply it. So there we go, we restored it. So what I'm doing here is now this is the same as windows.frame, windows.frame. So what I'm doing is it's basically doing a for loop, and I'm doing the start initialization. Here's my condition, and then here's my increment, my post method. So as long as my counter is less than the number of frames in the window, which the window will internally know, I guess, that there is 3 frames. I'm going to iterate over all of those. I'm going to iterate over a counter, and then I'm going to modify the location of each one. So I'm going to change all of these to MBA.com. For some reason that didn't work. So what might work? I honestly don't know. They're probably all blocked, all the modern browsers anyways. So if I save that and I try to refresh it, and when I refresh my screen here, it should you can tell now MBA refused to connect, right? If I do window.frames.count, it's going to give me windows.frames. It's going to give me some information on my frames here. So it's giving me something, a collection. Window.frames.length, 3. All right, so it counted 3. All right. So Windows knows about these 3 frames, and I'm trying to overwrite their URLs, their targets, which I did there. Then I also had a script in here somewhere. So what I want to do here is I have a function that's going to open up a pop-up. Now, this, might as well put this to my window. Sorry. Let's just create my window just so it's not too confusing here. My window. So I have a reference up here to my window. I'm going to open up a new window to Netflix, and I'm going to give it a bunch of features. So let me just quickly reload this. Again, I don't have a on-click button, so I have to trigger the event myself. I refresh, and if you notice there, it opened up Netflix automatically. So here's my page. Here it opened up Netflix. I tried to do some things on here. So if you look at the syntax here, I created a reference, but really I probably could have just done window.open. And I have window.open and I have the location. So that's going to open up a new window. I named it. I gave it a name. Let's see if it actually has that name. So does it have that name if I hover over that window? No, it doesn't. I guess they overrode it because they can control it. And I try to give the window some features. So in here I can actually open the window up. Menu bar, yes. Location, yes. Resizable, everything's yes. So what happens if I take away the menu bar, take away the location? Let's see if this works. Take away the ability to resize it, which you've probably come across. Take away the scroll bars. Take away the status. Let's see if this works or not. All right, close this out. Refresh this page. There you go. See, we got a pop-up now, as you would see at on a hacker site. You can see here it has, well, it didn't actually replace this, but it did take away the bottom bar. For some reason, it actually forced the scroll bar on us. And it doesn't allow me, does it allow me to resize it? It does. So, but it did take away a few things, and it didn't put it in a tab. So you could actually, if you really worked at it, you could probably see Netflix is probably smart. They don't want people linking to their site and doing that, and they probably can force some stuff. But some sites you could get away with, and then you wouldn't be able to like close it, right? You've been on those hacker sites. So if you worked at it, you could create one of those you know, those windows you can't get out of unless you like use the task manager to cancel it. But anyhow, that's some of the Windows properties, and you can play with them a lot. And to be honest, it's quite powerful because you're controlling the window. All right, but also on this, there's a whole bunch of methods, and we already learned about some of these methods already, I believe. Location object, we already demoed that, where you can change the location of the address to allow the browser to redirect. But there's a whole bunch of properties on this. There's the href, which is the URL, host name, which is the domain of the web host, the path name, when it's the path of current file, or the protocol of some of these, right? So if we were on Netflix, let's take a look at Netflix. No, I don't want to do that anymore. But all right, so let's look at this one here. Window.location.protocol. So it's saying HTTPS. This is HTTPS. It's not showing us, but because we have, if you don't know what HTTPS is, it means it's a transfer protocol. There's HTTP, which is unsecure. The S means it's secure, right? I'm sure if you navigate the web, you know that, but maybe not. That means that lock is on there. It has a certificate on there. It says the connection is secure. So if you are ever buying something online, I hope that you only buy stuff that has a secure connection for credit cards, passwords, private information, right? If you don't see that lock, the protocol is not HTTP, it's HTTP. It's HTTP, not HTTPS. The S would be missing for secure. It just makes there's a whole bunch of security stuff going on there. But anyhow, we can dig into some of that stuff, right? We can dig into, that gives me this whole path here, and then there was some other ones in there, right? There's path name, host, protocol, assign. So there's more in there. Right, host name is the domain of the web host. I don't know if that matters here in terms of sometimes, let's check. Maybe it gives us information of the server that it's on. No, it's just actually this part here, developer.mozilla.org. Okay. So anyhow, that's Windows location methods. We just already established what the open method is, the window open. So that interface method loads the specific resource into the new or existing context, whether it be the iframe, the window, or the tab. Remember, those are different contexts. Iframe, again, is going to pasture. Iframes still are needed, I guess, but they're really hard to program against, and they're especially dealing with session from one browser to an iframe is awful. So if the name doesn't exist, the new browser context is open in a new tab or a new window. So that's why it opens up in a new tab. If the name doesn't exist, then a new browsing context is opened in a new window or a tab. So here we go, var window equals, so we have the URL, we have the name, and we have the features. And this feature is in the square brackets, so that means it's optional. So in my example here, I had these features I was trying to pass in, but what we're saying is we don't necessarily need that. We can certainly have this by itself, right? And I'm sure we may not need this window.open. We could just have open there, right? Let's try that out. We could just have open and I don't know what to do about it. But I've always seen window.open because it's just to keep track of the context. All right, refresh this. There you see it loads Netflix. You're ready to sign up for $4.99 for 4 days for your first 30 days, and then it goes up to what, $24.99, something like that. All right. So if you see that was optional, URL, you hover over it, says URL, string features, and then we have the other features for the window. All right, cool stuff, right? Pop-up boxes, right? So we kind of already know about these already, and I'm only going to go through a few more slides, and then we'll get to the lab to finish up the window. We're not going to go through everything, obviously. I usually try to only go over like 30% of what's available because I could spend the entire 3 hours going through the window, but I'm not going to do that. I'll let you guys explore it. So the pop-up dialog boxes, modals, you may have heard them on the same voice. They notify or warn the user, or to get input. We've already used some of these in our labs. Again, we may have not known how or why they work. Now we know. We know they're part of a global window object. And we've used them before, right? Because we were needing to trigger some events. Now that we're getting into events on Friday, we don't have to invoke stuff right away from the page load. But you want these boxes, right? They're useful because you need maybe to prevent users from accessing other parts of the program. You give warnings, give confirmations. Then you can maybe, based on their choice, yes or no, you can redirect. You can do different things. Do you have unsaved changes? You want to leave the page? Yes, no. If he says no, then I guess if you want to. Are you sure you want to leave the page? Yes. Then you just basically lose all your changes. Otherwise, no is cancel. Maybe you need to save it. So the 3 kinds we already looked at was alert, was confirm, was prompt, right? We already looked at alert. If you didn't know, the full context was window.alert, but we've been using alert. We already kind of know that these messages don't require any user response. You just hit OK. It's basically kind of informational. Again, if you're ever wondering and you've seen better looking alert dialog boxes, it's not that they're using their own version of it. They're basically using the window native API, but then they're dressing this dialog up to make it look better. And there's a bunch of different libraries and things like that for alerts, but this is the vanilla browser one. Again, we also have confirm. Confirm is similar to alert, has the cancel and OK, returns true, false. We already looked at this, I think, in some of our labs. So you have the window confirm, grabs the results, checks if it's true. Again, we didn't need to do that actually, but then it actually can trigger an alert. And then of course, prompt. Prompt is what we have been using somehow to get some dynamic input from the user in our previous labs. And then you can grab that information, which in this case is the age, and you can actually do something with it, right? So another example I had there was, so I had some of these Windows methods here. Let's take a look at this one. So this one had 3. Now I don't think the resize works, but open a new window will trigger a new window, which it's actually going to my file, so it's not working. Alert, right? And then the resize window, I think, doesn't work, but close. No, I don't want to close it because I'll close my whole browser, but I could. Let's just see if I wanted to do that. I'll do that in a second. So what this looks like. All right, so for this example, I have inline JavaScript, right? You could certainly import that to a file. I have 3 buttons here, 4 actually. And what did I do here? Yes, right. So we have this markup, which is a button, HTML, right? And we never use this attribute called onClick. And we're going to learn more about onClick and events. But basically, when you click it, when you press it, you can actually trigger something. You can actually trigger a function call. So it kind of is interactive, right? To do this. Before, we had to click refresh every single time to run our functions. Now we can trigger our functions off of each of these buttons. So each of these buttons has a function attached to it so that if we remembered to use our DevTools, right? If we had DevTools in mind, and looking back at the source, and let's see if I can find the source to this page. There you go. Right, and if we were actually using our debugging tools, right, and we put breakpoints on each of these, right here, we close, right? I don't want to close my window, but if I, and then I can see these function calls here. So if I actually trigger, what I want to trigger, display alert. So I'm going to click alert, and it's going to capture it in my browser right here. So I know I've triggered it. All right. Okay, so if I trigger close window, you can see that there. I don't want to hit this point here, so I'm going to actually trigger this. Okay, so now I'm going to see that I can handle this. I'm going to say cancel, and you can see the execution did not go into this block here. Whereas if I clicked yes, which I will in a minute, it will fall through there and close. If I resize the window, so it didn't actually work, right? Window.resize, for some reason, it probably is not supported by Chrome, but you can see it's triggered. That's fine. And then open a new window. So if I open a new window, I can see the URL is this object here. I don't like that, actually. Let's make sure it works. So let's actually pass in something else. Let's pass in nhl.com, right? I don't know if that works. Does that work? We'll try it out. Let's try it. See if it works. You never know with live programming. So I'm going to click open new window. I see that it is this new address. I see that it's going to try to apply a width and height to it. Let's see what happens. Open up. Okay, so now it says pop-up was blocked. So you might want to actually allow this. Always allow redirects. See, your browser is helping you in case there's a site that's trying to maliciously do something with your experience. So I'm going to open a new window. All right, so it did work. All right, cool. So now, but it did give me a small window that has 500 pixels and 200 height, and it has this it has some policy going on there. Oh, I can't even close it now. Did I hack myself? No, I didn't. There we go. So anyhow, it did actually open up, but there was some policy. It opened up in a window this size. All right, cool. So the main takeaway for this one is, yes, you can have 4 functions here, and you will in your lab, 4 functions, and you can trigger it off of this new event, this attribute on click. On click. Now remember, you can't, it won't work if you don't invoke it with those parentheses. So if you have this kind of setup, it will not work. You need to actually have the invocation as if you were invoking it inline, right? As if we were doing this as we normally do. Right? But now we don't need to do this anymore because now we know that we can actually trigger it off of clicks, which is great. One step towards event-driven programming. And again, we just have 4 functions, and they all use the Windows methods, right? All right, so let's just watch one more video, and then we'll move to lab, and then I'll let you guys work on that. So one more. So I think it was window versus document object model fits in nicely with the next topic. So hopefully it's not confusing after this. Sorry for the ads.
In this lesson, we're going to examine the differences between the window and the document object as it relates to development. So far in this course, whenever we wanted to select something on the web page, we've used something like document and then get element by ID, and then we're able to find the element. And that is perfectly fine. And that's going to be something that you're going to be using quite a bit if you're using vanilla JavaScript. Now, another thing that you may not be aware of if you've never used it before is above the document tier, so above the document hierarchy, is something called the window. So if I say window here, you'll see that this returns a window object And if you expand it and scroll down, you'll see this is actually a pretty massive object. There are all kinds of things that you'll find in here. One very notable one is actually the document. So right here, whenever you're working with the document, you're actually working with the document that is nested inside of the window. And just for intuitive purposes, JavaScript gives you the ability to simply call the document, and then it automatically knows that you mean the document that is inside of the window object. And so if you want to test this out, just like we ran document.getElements by class name, and then we passed in topics like we've done in previous guides. And this returned an HTML collection of all of the divs with each one of the topics. And as a quick aside, in different parts of this course, I've mentioned how, because this has the brackets, that it's an array. Technically, it is not an array. It's what's called a HTML collection. It's very similar to an array, and you can use it in a very similar manner, but there are a few JavaScript functions and library methods that you can't use it on, such as some of like the map methods and filter and some of the reduce items that they need to work with an array. You can always convert this directly to an array. And so that's just a quick aside, just in case you have heard me call it an array. It's mainly because you can pretty much use it the same way. You can iterate over it with for each, and you can search for elements in it. You can get the length, but it is a very subtle difference. And so getting back to the main point on the difference between window and document, so you saw how we were able to do this. If I were to call up that same code and say window.document and run the same thing, you can see that we get the exact same HTML collection back. And so the window does nest the document inside of it. And so we're able to use this shorthand where we can call document and it references everything here. So why are we going through this? Well, there's a couple reasons. One is that if you are working with alerts, those are actually found inside of the window object. So if I click here and scroll down, you can see that if you need to work with alerts, that is technically considered inside the window, not in the document. So that's where you'll have an alert pop up on the page, such as something like this. So alert, hi there. And when it says hi there up here, this is actually lives inside of the window and not the document. So that's one thing to keep in mind if you're having to manipulate the alert. Another reason, and this is a very key reason that I've run into in the past, and it can be a little confusing if you've never done it before, is this page here doesn't have any iframes. Iframes where you can embed another website inside of yours. And so if I switch to another page, this isn't YouTube. If anyone's gone through the Flexbox course, this is the capstone project for the Flexbox course where we recreate YouTube. And this is an actual embed, and YouTube uses a iframe embed. So this is an iframe inside of our HTML site. And so if I call window here like normal, so if I say window document and I see what's inside of this document, as you can see, when I highlight it, this is everything we'd expect. It's our doc type, HTML, our body, and it's highlighting everything up here. So this is our document. But now let's go and inspect our iframe. So if I click on inspect and click on the iframe, and it shows exactly where that resides in the HTML. What it happens and what the browser does whenever you bring an iframe in is this iframe lives outside of the document. And so even when we come to the console, you can see it's no longer saying top. Now it has this weird little hash. And let's try to run that same code again. So if I say window document now, it acts like it's the same, but look at this. Now it's no longer highlighting the entire site. Instead, it is highlighting only the iframe. And if I click on this, it is now bringing me, not the head that we had before and the body tag here is just for the iframe. It is just for the embedded video that YouTube is sending us. And so this gives you the ability to treat an iframe very similar to how you treat your own document. So if you need to change any values on there or anything like that, then you need to highlight it. Typically the way you would structure it is you would wrap it up in some type of div, and then you can traverse through that and then grab the secondary window object. So from a visual perspective, just so you can see how it'll work, the entire window itself is the window object, and this is where you'd be able to perform tasks such as seeing the width of the window object to see if a user is on a smartphone or a tablet, or if they're on a full desktop browser like I am here. And so that encompasses everything that you see here. The document is the actual HTML file that gets sent whenever it communicates with the query, or whenever it communicates with the server. So when you communicate with the server, it sends that HTML document that resides within that window object. And then when you're working with an iframe, such as an HTML embedded video, now it's sending a window. Even though it looks like it resides in the document, it actually is outside of it. It's outside of the document scope, because technically this is its own website. And so this has its own set of window properties. And so here we'd have a window here, and inside of this is its own document. And then we have our wrapper window that contains the main document, and so they can be treated independent of each other. And so that's the main set of key differences between the window and the document.
All right, windows and documents, what can I say? Windows and documents, they're iframes are kind of nasty, to be honest. They really are. So because it's a window within a window, or window within multiple windows, and don't worry, I'm not gonna get you guys to do iframes. It's just to know about them. And yeah, so every window has the reference to the document, and you just need to know the difference between the DOM and the window. Anyhow, I'm gonna let you guys in on this lab. Let me see if I can quickly share this link before I upload it, because not everybody has it. So I'm going to copy this link and paste it in the channel in a second. And then you guys can go to those breakout rooms if you so desire to get some help from our tutors. So how about I add a conversation here and post that right there for the lab. Hopefully you can get to that. You may join those channels and do the breakout room or work on your own, whatever you may want. I'm going to upload these to Blackboard as well. So please use the starter code found here. So this reference will link back to my GitHub repository, which should have Lab 4 starter code. And you're going to go through, and this will provide the HTML for you to start, so you don't need to code all of this. So you will have perhaps a link to the JavaScript file. I may have been nice and set that up for you for each one of these. And the first 3 questions, I believe, are Windows-based related. And you just need to go through, and there's that note. Sorry, I'm gonna close this. That note is you may reference the API for document, reference the API for window. We're gonna be learning about the document API in just a little bit. Window API will probably be used for the first 3 questions. Exercise 1, create a HTML file. You get some starter code if you don't have it there, but we want to create a function called window details, and we just want to output some of those window properties. You may need, again, to dig into those APIs, find the inner width, the outer width, if it's full screen, the location of it, the visibility of status bars, and the history objects. So right here you can kind of see all that information for mine that I had, and then you can just get used to using those properties. Again, if you didn't want to code all of that HTML, you could just go to exercise 2 and copy copy that starter code, right, for exercise 2. I didn't provide it for exercise 1, probably because I thought you could copy it from here. Obviously, you got to remember to get the right JavaScript file. And then here's, if you can type all that out yourself, that's fine. Exercise 2 would be to create something called open tabs. And you're just going to invoke it. And it's going to iterate. Okay, so exercise 2, let's look at the code for that. So exercise 2 is basically a blank HTML page that references a JavaScript file. Inside the JavaScript file, there is an array, and the array looks like this. The array is an array of site URLs, and then here is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 URLs. So this is, as we learned last class, I believe, this is an array, string array with 4 elements. So you're going to have to create a function that iterates over each element in that site URL array. And then using your newly learned window methods, and open up a browser to each one of those sites and load it up and do the redirect. So that's what exercise 2 is, and I think that should be along the lines of what we learned. Exercise 3, starter code in there as well. So the starter code looks like this. The HTML is already done for you in exercise 3. Exercise 3 has 3 buttons, and I already wired up that on click. Now remember, it's all lowercase. If you put a capital C camel case, it won't work for vanilla JavaScript. In other languages like React, that would work, but more on that in a couple months. Right, so we have this code and it links back to a JS file. I don't think I put anything in the JS file, but let's look. JS file is 0 bytes. I just included it. So really what we want to do is, like in my example, you just want to have 3 buttons that you're going to wire up so that they invoke one of those functions when you click it. When you click it, you use your window API to trigger an alert, a prompt, and confirm, and that's it. And then I believe after that, so it looks like this. And then exercise 4 and 5, I believe we're just getting into the DOM document elements. So I shared that link. I'm going to stop sharing and recording. Hopefully I didn't miss any questions. Maybe I did, I'll see, but let me stop recording as well. All right.